So this evening we'll read from the Bhagavad Gita. This is the chapter 10, text number text number 12 and 13. Chapter is entitled The Opulence of the Absolute. Arjuna Vacha. Maybe I will just read it because it will be difficult for you to follow otherwise. Param Brahma Param Dhama Pavitram Paramam Bhavam Purusham Swasatam Divyam Adidevam Ajam Vibhu Ahustva Tvam Rasaya Sarve Devashi Naradas Tatha Asito Devala Vyasa Swayam Chaiva Bhavishyame. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhagavad Swami Prabhupada. Arjuna said, "You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal transcendental, original person, unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narada, Asita, Devala and Vyas confirm this truth about you, and you yourself are declaring it to me." In these two verses, the Supreme Lord gives a chance to the modern philosopher, for here it is clear that the Supreme is different from the individual soul. Arjuna, after hearing the essential 4 verses of the Bhagavad Gita in this chapter, became completely free from all doubts and accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He at once boldly declares, "You are Param Brahma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead." And previously Krishna stated that He is the originator of everything and everyone. Every demigod and every human being is dependent on Him. Men and demigods, out of ignorance, think that they are absolute and independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That ignorance is removed perfectly by the discharge of devotional service. This has already been explained in the previous verse by the Lord. Now, by His grace, Arjuna is accepting Him as the supreme truth. In accordance with the Vedic injunction, it is not that because Krishna is Arjuna's intimate friend, Arjuna is flattering him by calling Him the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth. Whatever Arjuna says in these 2 verses is confirmed by the Vedic truth. Vedic injunction affirmed that only one who takes to devotional service to the Supreme Lord can understand Him, whereas others cannot. Each and every word in this verse spoken by Arjuna is confirmed by Vedic injunction. In the Kena Upanishad, it is stated that the Supreme Brahman is the rest for everything. And Krishna has already explained that everything is resting on Him. In the Mukunda Upanishad, confirms that the Supreme Lord, in whom everything is resting, can be realized only by those who engage constantly in thinking of Him. This constant thinking of Krishna is smaranam, one of the methods of devotional service. It is only by devotional service to Krishna that one can understand His position and get rid of this material body. In the Vedas, the Supreme Lord is accepted as the purest of the pure. One can understand that Krishna is the purest of the pure and become purified from all sinful activities. One cannot be disinfected from sinful activities unless he surrenders unto the Supreme Lord. Arjuna's acceptance of Krishna as a supreme pure complies with the injunction of the Vedic literature. This is also confirmed by great personalities, of whom Narada is chief. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one should always meditate upon Him and enjoy one's transcendental relationship with Him. He is the supreme existence. He is free from bodily needs, birth and death. Not only does Arjuna confirm this, but all the Vedic literatures, the Puranas, the histories, in all Vedic literatures, Krishna is thus described. And the Supreme Lord Himself also says in the 4th chapter, "Although I am unborn, I appear on this earth to establish religious principles." He is the supreme origin. He has no cause, for He is the cause of all causes, and everything is emanating from Him. This perfect knowledge can be had by the grace of the Supreme Lord. Here Arjuna explains himself through the grace of Krishna. If we want to understand Bhagavad Gita, we should accept the statement of these 2 verses. This is called parampara system, acceptance of of the disciplic succession. Unless one is in the disciplic succession, he cannot understand Bhagavad Gita. It is not possible by so-called academic education. Unfortunately, those proud of the academic education, despite of so much evidence in Vedic literature, stick to their obstinate conviction that Krishna is an ordinary person. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshuzumritam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So in this verse, Arjuna is very clearly declaring that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, sometimes we have a misconception that who is the Supreme Lord, because in our many scriptures, there are many personalities who are projected as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For example, right here in this temple, when you come and you see the beautiful shrine, there is Krishna with his consort Radharani. And Krishna is supposed to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But then into the next altar in the middle, there is the altar of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Nityananda Prabhu, who are also considered the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then on the next altar is the altar of Sri Ramachandra, along with his consort Sita, his younger brother Lakshman, and his servant Hanuman. So then you would say, well, who is the Supreme God? Is it Krishna? Is it Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Or is it Ramachandra? So there's confusion. So of course here, Arjuna is declaring very clearly, not by his own thoughts, but by the grace of the Lord, he is able to understand who is the Supreme Lord. Secondly, he is following great authorities like Narada Muni, Asita, Devala, Vyasa, who are great sages who actually understand who is the Supreme Lord. So in our material situation, for example, if you want to know some knowledge, you have to approach who is knowledgeable in that subject matter. So supposingly say, you are interested in learning music, and you want to learn how to understand the musical chords and how to play music, how to make good music, and make the good music conform with the lyrics so it sounds very pleasant. And then you approach a chemist professor and tell him, can you please kindly teach me? You are a professor. You seem to be projected as a very learned man. So you approach a professor of chemistry and say, can you teach me music? Can he teach you music? Obviously not. And similarly, if you approach someone who is a musical maestro, say, can you teach me something about chemistry? Of course, he cannot give you. You have to approach the right teacher for the right knowledge. So similarly here, great sages like Narada Muni, Asita, Devala, Vyasadeva, they are all great sages who are very much fully knowledged in the absolute truth. And therefore Arjuna is saying that it is not just my opinion, but it is also the opinions of all these great sages who are also acknowledging that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now further in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining that this is not his views. This is the Vedic injunction. All the Puranas, all the Ithas, all the Upanishads are also proclaiming Krishna as the Supreme. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachit Ananda Vigraha, Anadaradir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karana. That he is the cause of all causes. Who is that? Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachit Ananda Vigraha. So this prayer is offered by Lord Brahma. Now Lord Brahma is not an ordinary person. He is actually in charge of the whole creation. And if we have a proper knowledge from the Bhagavatam, it is explained that when Lord expanded into this material world, and through his navel came a lotus plant. And on that lotus plant, there was a lotus flower. And on that lotus flower, Brahma manifested. Now Brahma is not an ordinary person. He is the creation of the Supreme Lord. And he is invested in knowledge of creation. For example, there was also, if you are attentive to the purport, it was mentioned that you have to understand this knowledge in a disciplic succession, which is coming in the line from Guru Parampara. So we here at the Hare Krishna temple are followers of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada, who is coming in the line of Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampadaya. So it started from the Supreme Lord Krishna, who gave knowledge to Brahma, and then Brahma in turn gave it to his sons, and in turn it came down to Vyasadeva, and from Vyasadeva it came to Madhava, and from Madhava he came all the way down to the present day. And why we are called Gaudiya Vaishnava is that in that paramparic line, it happened to be that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known different from Krishna himself, came 500 years ago in West Bengal to establish the Yuga Dharma of Harinam Sankirtan. So in that line of parampara, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also comes. So he starts with Krishna, then he goes to the great personality Brahma, and then along the line he comes with many great personalities. And to re-emphasize this and endorse it that this is the true knowledge which is coming down in paramparic line, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also came in this line to endorse it. The Lord himself endorses. And therefore, the knowledge which is coming in this line is called the paramparic knowledge. Now, paramparic knowledge means, Prabhupada explains, is that knowledge is coming from the Supreme Lord, the source of knowledge, to present day in His perfect and complete unit. It is not changed. It is as it is. And how that is, another analogy Prabhupada explains is of a postman. The postman will go to the post office and he will pick up a letter. That letter has been written by someone miles away and addressed to some particular person. All he does is he picks the letter up, he looks at the address and he delivers it to the person who is addressed to. He doesn't open the letter and sees what is inside, what is the contents. Is it good contents news or is it bad contents news or what it is. He is not concerned. He is just concerned with delivering the message as it is meant from the original source or the person who wrote the letter to whom it is addressed to. So similarly, the spiritual masters who are coming in the paramparic line, they receive this message from their spiritual master and pass it on to their disciple, and they in turn pass it on to their disciple completely and intact. But only sometimes what happens is that for practical reasons, sometimes this message is presented slightly differently so that the audience who is receiving the knowledge or the message, they can understand. For example, I am right now speaking to you in English language. But originally this message was passed down in Sanskrit. Now I don't know if anybody amongst us sitting here is a Sanskrit scholar. Hands up if anybody is a Sanskrit scholar. No one. So if I start speaking in Sanskrit, you will not understand. And to be honest, I am not a Sanskrit scholar. So neither would I understand what I am blabbering all about. But there is a common language which we can ascertain to, which is English language. And I think 80-90% of people sitting in this room are pretty much fluent with English. You know, we are living in England and the language is English. So we are quite familiar with the English language. So it is very easy to communicate in the language. So that's one point. That the message, original message was in Sanskrit, but the present day, we are communicating the message to you in English. However, sometimes even the different speakers will use different analogies to drive the point home according to the audience and the time, place and circumstances. For example, we have all been to school. Some of the younger people are still at school and college. The elder persons have already gone to that phase of schooling. Now, in our school, at least I can say from my example, when I was at school, we had 3 chemistry teachers, because there were 3 different classes. They were all teaching the same subject. Now, each teacher were given the same textbook and same standard curriculum, which was supposed to be taught to the students. So then when the students sit down for exam, they can actually answer the question correctly. But after the class is finished and we are in the playground and discussing the subject of chemistry, the class 1 and class 2 and class 3, we all have different teachers. We are all learning the same subject. But in our discussions, we have that there is slight difference in presentation. But the contents is the same. Presentation may be different. Just like, for example, you buy a gift and another person buys the same gift. One gift is wrapped in silver paper. Another is wrapped in golden paper. And then when you present that gift to respective persons, they may receive it and say, oh, my package is silver. My package is golden. Well, packaging may be different. Presentation may be different. But when you open the contents, what is it? It's the same, identical. It's not different. So similarly, when we are presenting Krishna consciousness in the Paramparic line, individuals may present it slightly differently according to his or her own realizations. But the contents and the essence is the same. So here in this verse, Arjuna is proclaiming that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's no doubt about it. He's Param Dham, Param Brahma. He's the Supreme. He's the purest of the pure. Now, Prabhupada is explaining in the purport that in order to understand Krishna, we have to hear about him. We have to remember him. And specifically, Prabhupada is quoting Smaranam. Smaranam means remembrance. If you remember him, then you can understand him. And how do you remember him? Is that you have to hear about him. So specifically in the Bhagavatam, young boy Prahlad Maharaj, he is establishing the mood of devotion and the process of devotional service. A young 5-year-old boy is proclaiming in one of the teachings of Sri Prahlad Maharaj, saying, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. 9 processes of devotional service. Of course, Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also is saying that if you want to know me, if you want to understand me as I am, as the Supreme Absolute, then how? The process Krishna is saying, Bhaktyamam abhijananti. Bhaktyamam means through bhakti. Abhijananti, to know him through bhakti, through devotion. So of course, the 9 process of devotional service, the 3 most important ones are Shravanam, Kirtanam and Vishnu Smaranam. Now Smaranam, as Prabhupada is emphasizing this particular purport, can only be done if you have a good source of Shravanam. If you have heard. If you hear about Krishna, then you can remember about Krishna. And if you remember about Krishna, then you do Kirtanam. You can speak about Krishna. But if you do not hear about Krishna, then you cannot remember Krishna. And if you cannot remember Krishna, then definitely you cannot speak about Krishna. For example, if I randomly ask someone, Sir, you have come to visit the temple today, and there is a person sitting next to you. Now, that person may be known to you, or it could be completely stranger who's sitting next to you. Right? And I say, can you speak something about the person sitting next to you? So if he's a complete stranger, what can you say about it? You look onto your right and say, okay, the person sitting next to me is a young female, wearing red dress, this, that, and other. And beyond that, what can you say? Very little. On the other hand, you happen to know that person. So you may give a little bit more detailed description of the person sitting next to you. But then after that point, how much more you can speak about him? Very little. But in the Puranas it is explained that Lord Anantashesh, who is the expansion of the Supreme Lord, he has thousands and millions of heads and thousands and millions of tongues. And with each head, with each tongue, he is reciting one of the beautiful pastimes and qualities of Krishna. And this is not done for a 5-minute period or 10-minute period or 1-hour period. It is done since the very beginning. And it is still going on now. And it is said that he never repeats the same pastime or the same quality again. So you can imagine that for thousands and thousands and thousands of yugas, thousands of tongues are repeating Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's qualities, Krishna's entourage, Krishna's paraphernalia, and never repeating it once. How much is there to know about Krishna? Unlimited. But how much can we understand? Very little. But still Krishna is saying that if anybody who can remember me, Janma karma chame divyam, saying, Krishna said, Janma karma chame divyam. That anyone who can remember my appearance in this world, my pastimes, my entourage, my paraphernalia, then surely that person will come to me. Come to me means that we will go back to the spiritual world in the abode of the Supreme in Krishna Loka, in the Krishna's planet, where there is no birth, there is no death, there is no old age, there is no disease, there is no fear. That fear is only in this material world, because this material world is known in two ways. One is Dukhalaya, place of misery, and second is called Mrityu Loka. That everyone, from the highest level to the lowest microbe, everybody has to take birth and everybody has to die. Nobody can live forever. Even if you look at it in the Guinness Book of Record, you will see the longest person probably who passed away, I think just last year, was 119 years old. And nobody lives beyond that. So everybody has to die. Nobody can live forever. Because this is the very nature of this material world. But in the spiritual world it says, it is eternity. There is no birth. And if you have no birth, then where's the question of death? Because in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, for one who takes birth in this material world, death is assured, a certain. But in the spiritual world, there isn't. Because Krishna himself is described as the eternal, the unborn. And because Krishna is eternal and unborn, and therefore he never dies. So similarly, you and I, who are fragmental parts and parcel of Krishna, is described in the Bhagavad Gita as that we are eternally fragmental parts and parcels of Krishna. And that spirit soul is same in quality as the Supreme. So if the spirit soul is same in quality as Krishna, then there is no difference between the quality of the you and I who are spirit souls and Krishna. But the only difference is that we are a tiny spark and Krishna is the unlimited origin. It is described in the Puranas that we are 1/10,000th of a tip of a hair. So if you take your hair and slice it and look at the little piece of tip of the hair and then divide that 10,000 times and take out just 1/10,000th of that, that is the size of the soul. It is described in the Puranas. So we are very, very insignificant. But our significance comes into being when we are connected with the Supreme. So of course the scripture is giving us also very deep knowledge that for every living entity who is that spirit soul, whether you are in a microbe, which is very, very tiny, to a large elephant, they both have the same size spirit soul. It's not that the elephant, which is a huge size in gigantic form, has got a bigger soul, and the microbe has got a tiny soul. It's the same soul. At the same time, it is described that each and every soul is accompanied by Paramatma. The Supreme Lord's expansion is Paramatma feature. And because of the Paramatma's proximity to the soul, you and I have significance. We have existence. We have identity. Otherwise, you take the Supreme Lord out of the equation, we lose our identity. We have no identity. We are insignificant. Another way to understand this is that when you light a fire, and in the fire the wood is burning and the sparks are coming out. Now imagine that each spark which comes out of the fire is a soul. And the fire itself is the representative of the entire eternal, complete spirit, Supreme Spirit, the Supreme Lord. Now, each spark which comes out of the fire, as it is to the close proximity to the fire, it will also be bright. But as that spark is going further away from the fire, what happens to its light? It begins to diminish in its brightness. To the point that it reaches certain distance away from the source, then it loses its identity. Because it doesn't have the source which is making it possible, its existence. But that the same spark, if it's blown back by the wind towards the fire, it re-establishes its brightness. And it becomes same in quality as the fire. So you and I, as spirit souls, we also have the same qualities. But unfortunately, we are so close in proximity to the super soul, the Paramatma in the heart. It's not very far from you. But we cannot feel his presence. Why? Because between the Supreme Soul, the Paramatma, and you, the tiny insignificant soul, there is a little curtain of illusion. And that curtain of illusion is thinking, mine, I am the controller, I am the doer, I have the ability to do everything. Just like in the Purport Prabhupada says, that when you have this misconception that you are the controller, then you cannot see the Supreme Controller. Because you are so much caught up in your own little illusionary world, thinking, I am the controller. But what happens at some point in your life, you experience that you are not really the controller. For example, you are driving a car, and you are an expert car driver, because obviously the British authorities have acknowledged that you are a good driver. Therefore, they have awarded you a driving license, which permits you to drive the car on British roads. So you are driving a car, whether it is a big car or a small car, a fast car or a slower car. It doesn't matter. The mechanics are the same, and you are fully in control of your car. But you are driving one winter morning, and unfortunately there has been such a cold winter that the roads are snowbound, and practically the snow has become like ice. You are driving on that. You are fully in control of your car, and all of a sudden you brake, you lose control. What do? You pray, hope that you will not hit any other cars or any other object, and the car will slowly come to a stop, because you are not in control. But on a nice summer's day, the roads are dry and everything, you are fully in control of the car. You are driving down M1. Obviously the speed limit is 70, but most people don't follow that. They drive 90, 100 miles an hour. But they're still fully in control of the car. And they're thinking, I'm controller, I'm in control of my situation. But at some point, like I said, that we come into this situation where even though we have the ability to control our situation, we cannot. Just like the car which is sliding on ice. No matter, you have the steering in your hands, you have the brakes, everything is in your ability. But you cannot stop the car. It is to its own vice. It will, slip and it may go into a twirl. It will skid this way or skid that way. And eventually it will come to a stop. And hopefully it won't hit any other vehicles or any other persons or a tree on the side. And your car will be undamaged, and you will say, thank God. But why thank God? Because we know that we are not in control. Another example I can give you about how we think we are in control. The scientists who are so educated, and they think that they know they can solve all problems with science. Science is so advanced that they can control everything. So when that famous incident happened, when one of the Apollo, I think Apollo 13, which was considered unlucky, when it was going towards the moon, they had problems. And 3 astronauts who happened to be American citizens were in trouble, and their lives were hanging by a thread. And all the scientists in NASA who were saying, we are the controllers, we know everything, Science is the solution to everything. They say, we don't believe in God. Were shown on all mass media televisions that they were also putting their hands together and saying, only God can help. And they were asking everyone in the world, please pray for the safe return of these astronauts. Now at that point they did not consider that they are appealing to the whole world to pray to God that let these 3 astronauts come back home safely. They were not saying that the astronauts happen to be Christians, so we are only appealing to the Christians to pray to the Christian God, or to the Muslim God, or the Hindu God, or the Jewish God, or XYZ God. They're saying just pray to God. Whomever you have faith in, pray to your God. And of course there is only one God, who is Krishna, the Supreme. Unfortunately, we have misconception and lack of knowledge and ignorance. Therefore, we try to say that it is different gods. Just like I explained just before the talk, I say on the altar you see Rama, you see Krishna, you see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And you'll be confused, who's the top link here? But they're the same. There's no difference. So similarly, there's only one God, who is the Supreme Lord, which is proclaimed by the great saints and sages, by the Vedic injunctions, by the Vedic literatures. Everyone proclaims there's only one God. Now if you ask someone who is following, say, Islam religion, they'll say, yes, there's only one God. You ask someone Christian, says, yes, there's only one God. You ask a Hindu, he says, yes, there's only one God. So everybody will say there's only one God. Then why we are saying there are so many gods? In the famous words of Shakespeare, he says, a rose by any name is still a rose. You take a beautiful flower of rose, and then you look at the rose, and then I say, you please describe what this is. So of course, if you are familiar with English language, then you will say, this is a beautiful red rose, or this is a beautiful pink rose, or this is a beautiful yellow rose. And then you will describe the rose petals, and the softness of the rose petals, and the fragrance of the rose. I said, that's perfect. Then I asked someone who doesn't speak English and said, what is your language, sir? Oh, my language is Hindi. I said, okay, sir, here is a rose. Can you describe this rose? And that person will very nicely, very eloquently describe the same rose in the Hindi language. And of course, in Hindi, the rose is called gulab. And then after the description is finished in Hindi, and the description in English is finished, and we put the two persons and say, let's have a debate now. And two will not agree. Saying, no, I say it's a rose. And say, no, I say gulab. Rose, gulab. And they will keep arguing till the end of eternity. But anyone with little intelligence will say, excuse me, please. It's the same object you're describing. It's a different language. But it's the same. So, the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Absolute. He is the Absolute Truth. But, according to our perception, according to what attribute we give to God, we describe Him. But it doesn't mean it changes. It's the same God we are describing. Now, we call Krishna, the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Now Krishna, if you translate in the language you and I can understand, English language, Krishna basically means one who is all beautiful and attractive. Now can anybody say God is not beautiful and attractive? Because of course the Christians say we are made in the image of God. Now if God is not beautiful and attractive, then why do we think we are so beautiful and why we are so attractive? And when we come here, and I can bet you my bottom dollar, although I'm not a gambling man, any person who walks in here says, Krishna is looking so beautiful. Krishna is looking so beautiful. Nobody will say, oh, Krishna is looking a little ugly today. Krishna is very beautiful. Now you ask a Christian, saying, what attribute do you give to God? Saying, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Master, the Savior. So of course God is the Lord, God is the Master, and He is the Savior. And ask a person who is following Islam religion, saying, Allahu Akbar. He's saying, the Almighty, powerful God. So he sees God as almighty and powerful. One sees one as Lord and Master and Savior. One who sees all beautiful and attractive. Now, don't you think the Supreme Personality of Godhead is described in the Bhagavatam, in the Puranas, is the almighty and powerful? He is the Savior, He is the Lord and Master, He is the all attractive and is beautiful. Then where is the question of my God and your God? Or misunderstanding? It is our ignorance which is disturbing our acceptance of that one God. Even now, for example, I say, let us do a little test. And I said, you are sitting in front of me. Please describe what you see. And obviously you will say, I am sitting here in the chair. And then you will say, there's a wall behind me. There's a beautiful picture of Panchatattva on this side. There's a beautiful picture of Prabhupada hanging here. And you will describe that and say, seems okay. But I don't agree with you. Because I don't see that. I see all you wonderful people sitting there. I see a door there. I see a door there. I see a picture on the wall there. I see another picture on the wall there. I see another picture on the wall there. That is what I will accept. But what you see, I will not accept. Then on the other hand, you will say, well, what I see, you will not accept. And I say, well, let's do a little change of position. You come where I am sitting and I'll come where you are sitting. And then we'll have a different idea. And after that, when I describe what do you see, and what I see, we'll be in agreement. Why? Because we have not a 180-degree vision, but we have a 360-degree vision. You have a complete picture. But generally, in the mass, outside in the mass world, because of lack of knowledge and somewhat ignorance, we have a narrow vision. And because we have a narrow vision, we try to see what we can only see with our 180-degree vision. We don't try to see a 360-degree vision, a complete picture. So, therefore, even in the scriptures it is explained that you approach the right person. As Prabhupada says, that this knowledge has to be understood in parampara. Krishna also is saying, Tadvidi pranipratena pariprashna sevaya, that you approach a spiritual master who is well versed in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness. And then you do pariprashna sevaya. You inquire from him subjectively. And then when you are satisfied with the inquiry, then you do sevaya. Sevaya means not that you do slavery service, but you offer service onto it. And when there is an exchange of service, you develop a bond. Because any bond is based on purely exchange of service. If it's one way, then it's called selfishness. But it is exchange of service, reciprocation, then it's called selfless. Like for example, the housewife, the mother at home, she is in the kitchen preparing a nice meal, and the rest of the family at mealtime sits down and eat the meal without showing any appreciation for the mother who has toiled in the kitchen for hours cooking. How would the relationship be? It would be very impersonal, selfish relationship. But you sit down and say, oh mom, you made my favorite. And the husband says, oh darling, this is my favorite. And there's appreciation. And then the mother who is told in the kitchen, she feels very much loved. And there is a bond of loving relationship. So the relationship between the spiritual master and disciple, the relationship between the devotee and Krishna is based on loving exchanges through service. Through service we can give our affection, and the loving service is the highest. Without that loving service, devotion doesn't have any meaning. And therefore Krishna says, Bhakti amami janati. Through devotion you can understand me. So through devotion we can connect with Krishna. Through knowledge we can connect through Krishna. And the knowledge coming from bona fide source, from the right source, then you can get the real knowledge, the true knowledge, and that will give you a clear picture. And because you have a clear picture and clear understanding of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you will serve Him. And as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, that if you serve Krishna, how Prabhupada is saying, he is quoting just one aspect of the 9 process of devotional service, smaranam, remembering of Krishna. Then you will become perfect. But as I said, how can you remember Krishna if you haven't heard about Krishna? So you have to do Shravanam, Kirtanam and Smaranam. And if you do these 3 things, then you will become a perfect devotee of Krishna, because you are hearing about Krishna, you are remembering Krishna, and therefore you can speak about Krishna. And of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who came to establish the Yuga Dharma in this day and age of Harinam Sankirtan, he has given a blanket instruction to all of us. And his instruction is, Jahare dekho tare kaho Krishna upadesh. Wherever you go, whoever you meet, speak about Krishna. Because when you speak about Krishna, the Supreme Lord, then it brings you happiness. You're talking about the Supreme, therefore you're connecting with the Supreme. You talk about something mundane, it may bring some mundane pleasure to you, but it is very short-lived. And you're not connected with that person. For example, I speak about Krishna. I glorify Krishna. I sing about Krishna's holy names in form of bhajans and kirtans. I'm connecting with Krishna. And because I'm connecting with Krishna, it is not a one-way connection. Krishna is connecting with me. And when there is a connection between Krishna and his devotees, then there is great pleasure and exchange of love between the Supreme Lord and his devotee. Now you may talk about someone mundane, say some Hollywood star or some Bollywood star. Are you connecting with that person? And is that person connecting with you? Definitely not. You talk about some screen hero or heroine, but you're not connecting with that person, and that person doesn't care two figs whether you talk about that person or you don't talk about that person, and that person will not even know whether you're talking about him or her. But here, you may be at the temple, you may be at your home, you are in this country, you are in that country, it doesn't matter. Wherever you are, when you speak about Krishna, Krishna is hearing. Why? Because he's not some miles away. Generally we say, pray to God, oh God. So we look up there in the sky and think God is somewhere in the sky. But he's here in the heart. He's sitting next to you. He's the Paramatma. But we are looking for him somewhere else. But he's right there. He's hearing everything. When you go to sleep at night, you switch off almost everything and you go into your dream world. But the Paramatma is not sleeping. He's wide awake, 24/7. And because of his awakeness, you get up next morning. If Paramatma goes to sleep, you're not going to wake up next morning. And then very quickly your loved ones will call up the funeral director and says, hello, I have sad news, someone's passed away, we need funeral ceremony, and you arrange all these things, and very soon you get rid of that loved one. Although no matter how much you love that person, but that person is no more, has left his body or her body, and you get rid of it. Of course in this country we don't do so quickly because of circumstances, but in India there is a tradition that if someone passes away before sunset, immediately you would take that person to the crematorium and burn to ashes. And if the person passes away after sunset, then you wait till the early sunrise. And at the first rise of sun at dawn, immediately you go to the crematorium and get rid of it. No matter how much you love that person, but you get rid of it, him or her. Then only thing is left is the memories of that person. But here, wherever you are, if you have done correct Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, heard about Krishna, remember about Krishna and speak about Krishna, then wherever you are, you talk about Krishna, you remember Krishna, Krishna will hear you and he'll connect with you. You connect with Krishna through prayers and his connection with by Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, and he will connect with you. And when that connection happens, you are no more now bound by the material rules, regulations. You have transcended. Therefore, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, rise above these three modes, O Arjuna. And what are the three modes? Ignorance, tamagun; passion, rajagun; sattvagun, goodness. So even goodness, Krishna is saying, rise above these three modes, Arjuna. Because when you are influenced by these three modes, you will think first, I am this body, and therefore everything I do is in relation to this body, and then you will be caught up into the web of action and reaction. But when you do devotional service, there is no reaction or action. It is just being freed. You are becoming sinless. You become free from all bondage. And therefore, you connect with the Supreme, and at the appropriate time, when you have finished your stint, as Prabhupada explains, as the material world is a prison house, and when we are freed from our prison house, we go back to the spiritual world. But most of us, we are not freed from the prison house. What we get is parole. And you know what parole means? That you violate that parole, you're back in the jail. So in our case, when we get parole from this material world, we die, and then we take rebirth. And then again, and again, and again. And we keep going through this cycle until when Krishna smiles upon us by his causeless mercy, and he showers upon us his blessings, and he connects us to him, either through reading these holy scriptures like Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, or, excuse me, coming to the temple and hearing Krishna Kirtan, Krishna Katha, or meeting with the devotees and do sadhu sangha, and then you connect with Krishna, and then Krishna will free you from further rebirth. It's no more parole. He actually frees you from your jail sentence. And we go back to the spiritual world. That is the ultimate goal, to go back home to the spiritual world. So it's about 4 minutes left, I think, or maybe just under. I will stop here. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free.